Today on Inspired Money.
And then we got hooked up with Dave Grohl, who wanted to produce a documentary about this sound studio, Sound City. And we went in a co-production deal with him, and we produced another documentary with him. And then that premiered at Sundance, and that went well. And then before you know, we were producing like an 8-episode docuseries for HBO with him.
This is episode 160 with founder of PlayLouder.com, Joe DiSanto. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week, we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Hey, Inspired Moneymaker. Welcome back. If this is your first time with us, welcome. Our guest is Joe DiSanto, and Joe has a really interesting story. At 25 years old, he had $70,000 in student loan and credit card debt. He paid it off by age 29. At age 30, he started a video post-production company with friends that has produced 2 feature documentaries and an Emmy award-winning TV show. With the birth of their son, Joe and his wife stepped away from that multi-million-dollar business. They decided to retreat to cheaper ground, moving from Los Angeles to a Gulfside town in Florida. At age 43, he's semi-retired with a net worth of over $2 million, happily spending time with his family and running PlayLouder.com, a finance, business, and real estate blog. In this episode, you'll learn how Joe paid off $70,000 to be debt-free, starting a business when you're young and have less to lose, and then listen to the end to hear how Joe's priorities have changed and why he and his wife think that maybe we should look at life in 4 acts instead of 3. Now let's get inspired with Joe DiSanto. Joe, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks you for having me. It's good to be here.
Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
Earliest childhood memory, gosh, I guess, it's kind of a bit of a somber one, but it did kind of affect my life, I guess. And, after my parents got divorced, my mom was not the greatest with money. And I remember, at some point I kind of started to dig a little deeper into like a financial situation. And I remember being like, hey, so like, how much money do we actually have now? And she was like, none. And I was like, wait, none at all? That doesn't sound good. And from there, actually, I think I kind of like started to really put a lot more thought to money. And I ended up getting my first job at 13, busboying on the weekends to help out a little bit. So not an awesome memory, I guess, but a good one in that it shaped my my desire to commandeer finance, from an early age.
Well, that's a young age to be asking that question to a parent. How much money do we have?
Yeah, I think I was probably about 11 or 12. Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know why, I think I probably matured a little bit, earlier than maybe I would have otherwise. But I didn't mind, I guess I kind of had an interest in it. I was curious. The news wasn't great at the time, but like I said, yeah, it ended up with some positive results.
You grew up in Providence, Rhode Island. How did life change after your parents got divorced?
I grew up in I guess you would say like a blue collar neighborhood in the north end of Providence. And we actually was pretty good childhood. There was a lot of kids in the neighborhood. I was like best friends with my neighbor we were like born 3 months apart. And we had a lot of fun. I mean, we were kind of like a little bit troublemakery, I guess you might say. We're riding our BMX bikes around. We're, probably breaking too many things. We were break dancing. This is like, mid 80s. So we all had like tags and break dancing sweatshirts, and, Beat Street was the movie from like 1982 is like our anthem. We would like watch Beat Street all the time and try to like emulate all the moves. So it was a lot of fun, but we definitely were like kind of the pains in the butts, I guess, around the neighborhood, riding over people's lawns on our bikes, making jumps, but it was really fun. And then my parents split up, but we ended up staying in my house. We moved briefly to Florida at the time. And then kind of my parents finally decided to split up and we moved back. And we remained in our house through almost the end of high school. And so it was pretty much the same in that sense. But like my dad owned a business, plumbing and heating business. So he was the moneymaker of the family. My mom was like a homemaker. And, the truth be told, she didn't have a lot of financial skills, number one, and she didn't really have a lot of earning potential. We come to find out, number two. And, the divorce is kind of dicey, and we didn't talk to my dad for a while. So we kind of went from like not worrying about money. We had, enough money for sure. Wasn't a big deal, to all of a sudden, like, my mom kind of commandeering the money and it sort of disappeared. Not because she was being bad. She was trying to do what she needed to do. She just didn't earn a lot of money. So we were just in the negative all the time. And so that's kind of what changed, I think, more than anything, is kind of all of a sudden being a little bit more financially tight, and then me becoming aware of that and, trying to essentially pitch in. And like I said, I kind of got my first job in like 8th grade. I think it was the summer after 8th grade. But by the end of high school, I was working at the supermarket like probably 25, 30 hours a week after school. I would work like 4 to 10, like 3 nights a week. And then I'd work on the weekends too. So I started putting a good amount of hours in at a young age. And maybe I wouldn't have had to do that if my parents had stayed together. But, it was cool.
Yeah, you had to be industrious.
Yeah.
It sounds like, given the money situation at that time, you did have to take student loans when going off to college. I guess if we stay on the subject of money, talk a little bit about like student debt and how that impacted your life. Yeah.
So I paid for my school. I had good grades, so I got a pretty good amount of grants and things, but the rest I paid for with loans and credit cards. And by that time, we were talking to my dad again, and he pitched in a little bit. He pitched in a few grand a year. But I left school with about $30,000 in student loans, which by today's standards really probably isn't that bad. I mean, I think school's a lot more expensive. But I also funded a lot of like my school supplies and different things on credit cards. So, and I think I had about 15 grand in credit card debt. So I started out after college about 45 grand in the hole. And, I moved to New York where I started getting into the post-production business. And that's the kind of business where you don't make a lot of money when you start. So, I was losing money every month, unfortunately, for the first many years of my career, ultimately. And I think I peaked, topped out at about $70,000 of debt. Yeah, it's kind of remarkable that I managed to get that much credit card capacity. Probably I was maybe fibbing a little bit on my credit card apps, but yeah, it was the 30 grand student loans. And then I racked up to about 40,000 of credit card debt. And then finally, it really was like a breaking point at that time. But it's like, I got lucky. I kind of finally advanced in my career. I had been doing a pretty good job at this job I was at, and I was getting some promotions, and I ended up getting promoted to running the place pretty early on. And I finally started to make better money where I could really start chipping away at the debt. So I peaked, and then right at like the crucial time where I was like literally probably not going to be able to be making my minimum payments, I finally got a decent raise that like got me in the black on a monthly basis. And I started really making more money from that point out, and being able to chip away at the debt and save essentially to buy my first house. And really, it was my first house that ultimately got me fully out of debt, because I was able to, a few years in, able to refi some money out and pay off my student loans and make a whole bunch of moves with that. And that really actually made a really big difference in my life, having like worked hard to buy a house early on.
It's a little bit counterintuitive, right? Because when you have the credit card debt, the student loan debt, buying a house is like, now you need mortgage debt.
There's this debate of like, your home not being an investment, or I just like vehemently disagree with that. I look at your house as an investment. I mean, and the reason I look at it that way is because you have to be paying rent, whether you like it or not, unless you're going to live at home or, or something like that. So if you're putting money out every month for something, you want to do your best to turn that money into some sort of investment. And a house is a great way to do that. It turns the money you would spend in rent every month into an investment where you're building equity in addition to solving your housing need. And luckily, big city real estate has been good to me. And I bought the house in 2004. So it was pre-bubble. It managed to appreciate, and I was able to refi some money out in like late 2006 before that bubble happened. And so that refi money basically just cleared out my remaining credit card debt. I was, chipping away at the credit cards. I hadn't really touched the student loans much because I wanted to get rid of the credit card debt first. But I was like, I really want to buy a house. So, and I really think that's important. So I was like, I'm gonna put some money towards that because I really think that's important to prioritize. And that turned out to be a good decision. Now, granted, I was the beneficiary of a good real estate market at the time. Eventually, the bubble burst and my house went underwater, but it was fine because, I could afford living there. I liked the house. We just remained there. And we enjoyed living there. It was no problem. And eventually the market, turned around and we made really good money on that house, sold it tax-free. All the gains were tax-free, which is a remarkable thing about owning a house. And we put that money into a bigger house in a better neighborhood. And then we made a bunch of money on that house tax-free. So I'm like, and I do the numbers on everything. I've done the numbers on owning versus renting, and the numbers for owning, are very compelling versus renting. I mean, you have to really be paying very little rent for a good quality housing to say that renting is a better deal than owning. I'm vehemently on the side of owning your residence, I like to call it.
Well, there aren't too many things in life that you can do tax-free. Uncle Sam wants to get his piece and they keep taking away some of those deductions and benefits. So you've got to take advantage of the ones that you've got. If we can take just a step back, I know that you worked at Morgan Stanley Dean Witter for a bit. That must have been before you got into post-production. Like when you landed that job, did you think that was your ticket to paying off the debt that you had at that time?
No, actually, I got that job. I went to New York. I did the post-production for about a year, and I just wasn't making enough money. And I was like, I gotta, I liked this place I was working, and and I liked post-production, but I was like, I gotta find something else because I'm just, things are not moving in the right direction here. So I started doing freelance design work where I was getting more hourly rate. And then a family friend knew someone there and they were hiring for someone in the bond marketing department. So I actually worked on the 60th floor of World Trade Center Tower 2, believe it or not. I know it's very strange to look back on that. And I was on the bond trading floor, but I was, the whole floor of that building, about half of it was the bond trading floor. And the other half was like the marketing people. So we would make marketing materials so the traders and brokers could sell Dean Witter products to like the retail operations. Okay. So we would I would make a flyer about the latest debt offering and we'd send that out to Morgan Stanley Dean Witter retail to be like, you should sell this to your clients, So it was interesting. I was able to kind of get my art degree working and kind of go check out finance. And I was always into finance. So I was like, yeah, that could be a good thing. But even that entry-level job at Morgan Stanley at that point paid $30,000 a year. It wasn't a tremendous salary. I mean, if you were going into being the broker side or trader side, obviously it would be more. But I just didn't like the corporate environment. I was there for 2 months, and I went into it as a full-time job, and I was like, but I just was like, I just don't want to work in a corporate environment like this. I can't do it. I mean, and honestly, it's kind of funny, but a very kind of symbolic thing about it was I had to have a clean shave every single day and wear a suit. And I was like, I hate shaving. This is a sign. If I have to shave every day to this degree, this might not be the career for me. So I was like, you know what? I think you have to listen to your instincts on this one, Joe. And I was like, I was there for 2 months, and I felt bad because, the family friend kind of, got me the gig, and I was like, I'm so sorry, but I just, it's not it for me. So I missed post-production. I was like, you know what? I tried something else, but I really liked the career of post-production, and I ended up getting another job at a different post-production company in New York. I was making a little bit more money, but still not enough. And I was there for about a year. And then we were living in Queens. So I was not too far away from work. I mean, I was subway, but then we moved out to Long Island just because my girlfriend at the time was not liking living in Queens. And so I was taking the Long Island Railroad in at that point in year 2. And we were really far out. Like I was taking this railroad in like an hour and a half each way. And I would just like sit on this train like every day, and I'd like look around, and everybody just looked so miserable. On the way home, it was like guys in their suits, they're holding their brown bag, beer, and they're just like staring blankly off into space, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't think I want to ride this railroad every day for the rest of my life either. There's definitely something wrong here. So I was like, maybe New York's not the place, but who knows? So my girlfriend and I, it was financially irresponsible, no question, given my state. But I was like, I want to go on a road trip. We got to get out of here. We need to shake it up. Like, it's going to cost us money, but screw it. I owe so much money as it is anyway. How much worse could it get? We went on a road trip, a 2-month road trip, and we were intending to go back to New York, but we went through Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is obviously another great place for post-production and production, actually better. And we stayed there for about a week, then we went up all the way to Vancouver, and we were supposed to be going home. And I just was sitting to my girlfriend, and I was like, LA looks really good. Like New York is just, I'm not feeling New York anymore. It's like living in a filing cabinet or something over there. It's so concrete jungle, and LA is just like sunny and the beach and all this stuff. So I'm like, I think we should just move to Los Angeles. What if we just drive down there instead of going back to New York? My girlfriend at the time was not a spontaneous person, ironically, but for some reason, I guess she wasn't liking New York that much either. She was like, okay. We just went back to Los Angeles. We stayed in the Vagabond Inn for like 2 weeks. We managed to find a cheap place on Venice Beach, which in 1999, you could actually get a reasonably priced place, which is not true today. And we started our Los Angeles, my life in Los Angeles. And I was there for like 20 years. And it was an awesome run and an awesome time. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like there was just a couple of like funny moments between the shaving and then like the brown bag beer thing. Like it really defined, I guess, what I wanted out of life, which was to not have a close shave every day and not like stare blankly off into space while I commuted on a train, an hour and a half each way to Manhattan. So
that is funny.
There you go.
Sounds like mission accomplished. I know that you call yourself a DIY entrepreneur. At what point in this move from New York to LA do you set up your own company?
It was about, let me think. I'm going to say we got there in 99. We started the business in 2000. We opened the doors basically January 2007. So it was about 6 years or so, 6 or 7 years. The other thing I did always want to do was have a business. And I feel like, despite my parents being in the split and all that, my dad owning a business, really, that makes a big difference, I think, in a young person's life. Being he just owned a business, it made owning a business seem very, very doable. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, you can own a business. It's not that big of a deal.
Right. It's a reality in your mind.
Yeah. You're like, yeah. And I just always wanted to do that. I don't know exactly why. I don't know if it's because that's what my dad did or whatever, but it just seemed like there's something I wanted to do. I think I later learned out is that like I really have specific ways of how I think things should be done. And when I work for other people, I get frustrated, that I have to like, deal with other people's ideas, stuff about running the place. But I always wanted to do that. So that was just like on my mind. I wanted to ever since I got out of college, I wanted to buy a house and I wanted to own a business. So those were my two goals. And I was always just keeping my eye out. It's like, first I got to figure out this debt thing and, make some contacts. But I'm like, at some point, I got to find the right time, but we're going to break off. We're going to start our own business. And I was working at this company and I met it's who became my closest friends in Los Angeles. And like the four of us, we were just like a good fit together. And actually one of the four of us, we knew each other in New York and he moved to Los Angeles as well. But we were just like a really good fit. And I could tell that at some point we were going to be able to like leave and maybe do something on our own. And it was kind of a tough thing to do because, we didn't want to like abandon the company we were at just to do that. But we really just wanted to do something on our own. So eventually the opportunity to do it sort of, it didn't come up on its own. I kind of prepared quietly in the background for it. But eventually the time came where we were going to have to do it, or not. And we chose to break off and start our own company. It was tough, but it worked out really well. And I don't know, it was like something I had pre-visualized for a long time. I used to play golf a lot as a kid. That was like my one sport. I think I like sports where you don't have to like work too hard. But in golf, you have to like kind of like think about the shot you're going to hit, and you have to really pre-visualize it and like see it going well in your mind. Because if you're thinking negative thoughts before you hit the ball, it's a very good chance something bad's going to happen. You're going to shank the ball or whatever. So you always want to like picture the ball doing exactly what you want it to do. And that will improve your chances of success. It is kind of like a game of psychology. And I just had been like pre-visualizing owning this business for a long time. Like I would sit on the train often and kind of daydream about like having an opening party for the business, and like what would it look like inside and what kind of clients would we have? And I spent a lot of time like having these sort of pre-visualizing daydreams about it. And then it really finally, it came to fruition. And I feel like, pre-visualizing what you want to do and thinking about it a lot, like, and like kind of like it pushes you to like do it somehow. It's a little bit cosmic, I guess, but I think it was an important thing for me. And then eventually, actually, we had that opening party, and it almost played out like exactly as it used to play out in my head. When I would be daydreaming about it. It was pretty bizarre, I have to say.
Yeah, it must be interesting because especially with your post-production work, like you must visualize in your mind. It is like seeing a movie. It's a movie scene.
Oh, it totally was. It totally was. And actually, yeah, filmmaking, I guess, ironically, is that as well, especially if you're a director or in production, you really, you have to pre-visualize everything you see. And actually, there's a process in the production pipeline called the pre-visualization process, where you like map out what you have in your head, like either on paper as in storyboards or whatever. But yeah, you have to like see exactly what you want to do. So by the time you're actually shooting, it's like you're not thinking about what you're going to be doing anymore. You're just doing it.
Joe, what did that process of quietly preparing look like? Were you able to line up your future clients, or was that too early?
Truth be told, I mean, and this happens in many small business arenas, when key people leave a company, they often take clients, and it's not always pretty, but that is what happened in terms of, some of our early clients. Basically, the way it works in post-production is like the artists, we call them, or they're editors or visual effects artists, whatever. They get a following. Like, people like to work with this particular editor, say, and they come to you over and over. It's kind of like a lawyer or any other kind of like professional endeavor. You create a following of clients, and then if you move to another place, you take your quote unquote book of business with you. Now, the place you're leaving doesn't want that to happen. They try to stop it, but if you want out, you're going to try to take it with you. So we left, and that's how like our early clients came to us. It wasn't a lot. We were pretty young, so we didn't have a lot of clients that were sort of following us at that point, but it was kind of enough to get going. And then other than that, I do the business side of the business, among other things, but business, marketing, finance, all that sort of stuff. So I was quietly trying to figure out how are we going to get the money for this. And what I had done was I made a corporation that was kind of like my own consulting corporation. I was doing some side design jobs, so I was getting money to that. In order to get financing, you have to, beyond a credit card, you kind of have to be in business for at least a couple of years. So I was like, I know we're going to need to have a corporation that's in business for more than 2 years. So I got to get that going. So I had a little bit of revenue on this corporation going. Luckily, at the time, the lending standards were fairly loose, which was good. But being I had been in business for a couple years already, I was able to get, kind of a small credit line going for the business. I was able to qualify for equipment leases, which is like a really good, easy way to get business financing, because when you do a lease on equipment, like, all the computers we had to buy and furniture we had to buy for the business, the equipment and furniture is the collateral for the lease. So it's a lot easier to qualify for that kind of financing than just like an unsecured line of credit or working capital loan. So those two things were kind of, helped us to be able to get this thing off the ground. And then in addition to that, my house and one of my other partners' houses came into play because I had a home equity line of credit. I was able to tap that a little bit for startup costs as well. That's what I was doing in the background quietly. I was trying to map out exactly how are we going to finance this business and get it off the ground? Because you do have to, if you're going to enter the post-production business, you got to do it in a pretty decent level way so that people will take you seriously. So we needed a location and an operation that was big enough, looked nice enough. We had the proper equipment to do the work. And back then in 2006, a computer system that could do proper visual effects, you can do it on your laptop. Back then, you had to spend $250,000 potentially, on a piece of equipment. So you needed some money. We in the end, I think, we kind of piecemealed it. But that first year we were building, we kind of did enough to get started and kept adding. Luckily, we had some revenue. But I think our initial startup costs were about $500,000, all said and done.
Coming up, we talk about risks of starting your own business, commercial real estate, and then listen to the end to hear why Joe and his wife leave the entertainment business. All that and more right after this short break. The show notes for this episode can be found at inspiredmoney.fm/160. If you're listening in your car or wherever you are, check the show notes if you want to learn more about Joe, playlouder.com, and all other things mentioned in this episode. It's time for the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. In preparing to chat with Joe, I checked out his blog at playlouder.com. He wrote an article entitled, "The Financial Independence Mindset is Critical." In it, he writes about smart habits for financial independence. The earlier that you want to retire, the more strict and smart you have to be with your money. Are you willing to make changes to your lifestyle? Joe says these steps will get you closer to financial independence. Number 1, pay off all your debts. You have to pay off your debt or else you're spending way too much on interest payments. In order to build a net worth that allows you to retire early, you should have as few liabilities as possible. 2, increase your savings. Joe suggests adjusting your budget to eliminate any unnecessary expenditures so you can set aside more money every month. 3, earn extra money. Ask for a raise, or maybe you can find a side gig that will help you earn extra money every month. In order to save even more money, make sure you put your money into an account that doesn't have hidden banking fees. This way you won't be losing your hard-earned cash. 4, invest as much as you can. Retirement plans and investment portfolios are going to be one of the main ways that you can grow your wealth. There are a lot of ways to invest, including your 401k, Roth, traditional IRAs, stocks and bonds, annuities. Meeting with a financial advisor can help you decide which investments have the best outlook for the future and how to best diversify your portfolio. Finally, remember that the quest for financial independence is more than just habits or tactics. Sure, the numbers are important and you need to plan accordingly, but it's also a mindset. Think about what it would mean to retire early. What does that end goal look like? Will it be worth it to sacrifice and change your spending habits now? Is this something that you can fully commit to? Whether it is or it isn't, I think these tips are sound. If you can implement these, even in a small way, you'll gain financial flexibility, and that's winning. That's the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Inspired Money is brought to you by Runnymede Capital Management. We help you to plan, invest, and worry less. Have you signed up for the free 30-day Fear Challenge yet? It's not too late. You can sign up anytime. The 30-day Fear Challenge is writing down one thing a day that gets you out of your comfort zone and then crossing them off your list. Let's see if this has an impact on our lives. I'm happy to report that I've deleted more than 9,500 emails from my inbox, and I am on my way to inbox zero. Now, before you sign up for compliance and legal, don't do anything dangerous. Whatever you try, know that you're participating and choosing your daily challenges at your own risk. Sign up at inspiredmoney.fm/challenge. That's inspiredmoney.fm/challenge. You'll get a welcome email and then 4 additional emails, that's one every week, that include some tips and ideas. We can share our progress and encourage each other at the Inspired Moneymakers Facebook group. That's inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. If you complete it, I'll even award some prizes. Let's do this and see what great things can happen. Our Inspired Moneymaker of the Week is Sam Jurgens. He wrote this review. I stumbled across Inspired Money on my journey to FIRE and financial education, and I'm grateful that I did. Andy is a personable, intelligent, and engaging host with a great demeanor. Not only is the show inspiring, it is extremely informative and helpful to anyone seeking a positive experience with money. If there were more shows like this, the podcast world would be a better place. Thank you so much, Sam. I actually got to speak with Sam a while back. Sam, how's your job? Have you figured out any great side hustles? It's always great to chat with listeners of the podcast. Now you can be a future Inspired Moneymaker of the Week just like Sam. Write a review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And even better, be like Sam and go to inspiredmoney.fm/15, that's 15, to schedule a 15-minute call. It would be great to get to know you. You're listening to Inspired Money. I'm Andy Wong. How risky was it at that time? I mean, if things hadn't worked out, could you have lost your house?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, starting a business in that sense, at least in that time, it's all or nothing. I mean, we started kind of young, which the detriment of that, like 2 of my partners are 27 and then me and the 4th partner were 30. The detriment of that is that we didn't have a lot of clients. So we really, we couldn't hit the market, quote unquote, like this flashy place with a whole bunch of jobs already in-house. We had a small amount of clients and we kind of had to build it brick by brick. But the benefit of doing it young was that we had nothing to lose. We're like, we barely have money anyway. You know what I mean? And we don't have kids and there isn't debtor's prison anymore. So with those 3 things in mind, if we go for this and we have to file bankruptcy, then that's what'll happen. The bankruptcy laws, I do think get used for not so great purposes often, but I feel like they are there to, in a sense, encourage people to take great risks to start businesses, because it's like, well, it's not going to be great if you have to file bankruptcy, but again, you're not going to go to jail. You're going to disappoint a bunch of banks and all that jazz, of course, but you won't go to jail. So I can't imagine starting a business when there was debtor's prison. That would be like, no, man, no way am I going to do that. That's crazy. I'm going to end up in jail.
Just give me the salary job. That'll be fine.
Yeah. So yeah, it was totally risky, but if we had to file bankruptcy, yes, I would have lost the house. I didn't have that much equity in the house at that time anyway, because I had paid off my student loans, I paid off my credit cards, which is a great thing to do because I turned non-deductible interest into deductible interest, or already and at a much lower interest rate. And then the rest, of the equity I had available, I did put into the business at that time. So the house was kind of tapped, you know what I mean? And at that time, you could go you could go up to like 95% loan to value on your house because like the lending standards of 2006 were just dumb. But I was like, hey, yeah, if you want to give me the money, I'll take it because I got stuff to do. Yeah. So, but luckily it worked out. We had a pretty good amount of revenue our first year, and it just luckily grew every year. Not crazy. It's not like a startup of today where you're in business for 6 months and all of a sudden you have a valuation of $50 million and, you're looking at an IPO. We were like, essentially the old school brick and mortar, operation. I mean, post-production and production, they're very fun and kind of sexy industries, but they're not all that different from your average, trade type industry, like a plumbing business or something like that. They're similar size often. You have management, you have, I always related to like plumbing because that's my dad. It's like in the plumbing business, your plumbers are kind of your artists. They're the ones that are out there doing the work. And it's not all that dissimilar, from, your kind of average small business. It's not like a startup scenario that everybody, is interested in doing today.
It sounds like you have you're the artist, but you also have the business mind to crunch all the numbers, to make some of these correct choices and decisions. Therapy Studios did well. You guys garnered awards, and it sounds like you continued to do smart things financially, just like you did believing in buying a house. You also bought real estate for your business.
Yes. And thank you for that compliment. You are right. I do have an art and a math brain. I was an art major, photography major in college, but I was also really good at math all the time. And actually photography, ironically, is an art form that is very mathematic. Using a camera, prior to digital cameras, old manual cameras, there's a lot of math and kind of science about how to do photography well. It's kind of like architecture is also a creative field that involves a lot of math. I learned kind of early on when I got to the big city, New York and LA, and I could actually see what a really, truly talented artist is. Like, there are people out there that every single day they can come up with amazing designs just out of nothing. They sit down with a blank piece of paper and like 2 days later, they have something and you're like, wow, that is really good. That just looks awesome, And musicians are like that too. They sit down at the piano and, before you know it, they have this amazing song. And you're like, where does that come from? And it's just, it's talent, basically. And I realized I didn't really have the level of artistic talent to compete in the big markets. But I also quickly realized I had other talents, which was business, finance, socializing, sales. And I also was an artist, and I knew that side, so I could relate to my talent really well, and I could work with them, and I understood exactly what they were doing. I saw that going that road, more of the business, and we call it producer road, was going to be my thing. And that's, I started to take over all that for the businesses, and we were always looking about ways to improve ourselves. So you always have to keep being creative about improving your business, figuring out new lines of revenue. And I have a very healthy fear, of failure, I guess, or whatever, where it's always got me worried. I'm like, I feel good, but I don't want to get complacent. We got to keep hustling. So we would always be trying to do what I call piggybacking, which is like, hey, we've made all this investment in this gear and all this stuff, and we have a staff, but we're not using it like at full capacity. We just don't have enough clients right now to like have full capacity. So what else could we do with this stuff? We should be doing other things that maybe, we can try that might end up being a new form of revenue. So we were always looking for different projects to do. And we ended up producing, we were like, all right, what? We should produce our own content, and see if we can make a run at actually being producers. Because by and large, we were kind of work for hire, people that had projects, either advertising or film or whatever, they'd come to us and hire us specifically for our editing services or whatever. So we decided to utilize much of the resources we had in place to produce documentary. And that worked out really well. It was a great documentary. It premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. We put our heart and soul into it. And it was a really good interesting subject matter about the life and work of a guy named Ray Kurzweil. I don't know if you by chance familiar with him, but he's a very prolific inventor. And he wrote a series of books about what he calls the singularity, or essentially a point in time in the near future where we're going to sort of be able to merge with our technology and eventually live as long as we want. So it's a really interesting topic.
What's the title?
It's called Transcendent Man is the name of the documentary. So that was very successful. And before you know it, people were like, we were in conversations about producing other things. And then we got hooked up with Dave Grohl, who wanted to produce a documentary about this sound studio, Sound City. And we went in a co-production deal with him, and we produced another documentary with him. And then that premiered at Sundance, and that went well. And then before you know, we were producing like an 8-episode docu-series for HBO with him.
I really enjoyed that one, the Sonic Highways.
Oh, did you see Sonic Highways?
I did.
That was honestly like for me, my wife was an editor on one of the episodes. We had about 6 editors working. She edited the Nashville episode. But that was just like a real highlight of our careers. And almost in a way, after that, it was really hard to do anything else, because we did a lot of commercials, and like people want to avoid watching commercials. You know what I mean? But like people really wanted to watch Sonic Highways. We're like, wow, it's so great to make stuff people want to watch.
It was great because the music was great. And then you see it within the context of these famous studios. It was just really cool. There was like a history lesson. It was well done.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you, man. It was really fun to make. So that really worked out. And then the other thing, like, I was talking about the home ownership and stuff, and how I look at it as you're not just buying a house, you're buying a piece of investment real estate that you just so happen to be the tenant of, right? And that's how I look at a house. And I buy my houses, I look at them the same way as any investment. Like, it's got to be a good deal. Like, I like to find something that has some capacity for improvement, and there's some money, there's some value to build there. But that, that was working for me. So I'm like, we were growing in the business, and we needed to find like a bigger place. And I was starting to go look at other real estate. So do I get any money to like get this built out from these guys? And they're like, no, you just do it. You pay for it yourself. And I'm like, so wait, I'm going to like really deck out somebody else's property? I'm going to spend like $500,000 on someone else's property? Is that what you're telling me? And he's like, pretty much. He's like, we might be able to get a few bucks from them, depending, I mean, this is Los Angeles real estate in particular. It's, in demand. So I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. We're going to buy a building. When you buy a building for your business, it's funny. Even though you're basically buying a place that you're going to inhabit, kind of just like your house, it's very much looked at as an investment. You put it in an LLC. Your business is the lessee. So my business, Therapy, was renting, but it was renting a building that I also just happened to own. And that relationship there in like the business world is very clear, and it is considered an investment, And I was like, I don't know why people don't think of their house this way, but it's like, you're just someone who pays rent, and you also end up paying rent to yourself when you own your house. It was tough to do, but we got in. There's a program by the SBA, as like a SBA 403B loan. Anything over 50%, you can get in for like as low as 10% down. And I was like, okay, we might be able to do that. And so I switched gears, and I was like, we're going to buy a building instead of renting and renovating someone else's. So we did that, and we renovated our own building and put that money we would have spent on something else, and created value for ourselves. That worked out really well. And then we eventually decided we needed even a bigger building. So we sold that building. We made a bunch of money, and we bought another building in LA. And both of these projects, by the way, they were like, I looked for things that I could get for less money and really create value with. And I piggybacked, I was like, we're going to be spending money anyway. So I'm going to make a money-making venture out of the fact that we need to get a new space. I want to find something that's crappy and it up and make it great. So we were buying stuff, that they became big projects because we bought stuff that was essentially zoned as warehouse in LA, and we were trying to convert it over to creative office space. And, you really have to go through what I learned as a very significant development process to do that. you have to before you know it, I was like, oh, I need an architect. Oh, I need to do all this. And, I basically commandeered that for us because I was into it and I liked real estate already. So I kind of made a secondary project out of taking this money we were going to be spending on rent and turning it into a very, very valuable investment. And that was yet another piggyback.
It sounds like a lot of work.
It's a tremendous amount of work. Yeah, it is. There is nothing passive about it. That's for sure.
Yeah, it sounds very smart approaching the real estate. You gain independence, flexibility. You're not at the mercy of a landlord who is going to jack up the rent on you. Real estate tends to be a very long-term goal. Like if you're going to be buying real estate for your business, I would assume that the vision is that you're going to stay in that business for a long time. Can we talk a little bit about Act 3 of a 4-act life? Because you made a pretty big shift.
Yes, I did. And it wasn't necessarily like part of our grand plan. I liked working. I still like working, and so does my wife. And we were really enjoying, by and large, our career. I mean, you can get frustrated and sort of fed up with just about anything if you do it over and over again every day. But by and large, we really loved our work, and we worked with our friends. I mean, it was an ideal situation. Like I would certainly have no regrets and would not trade it in for anything. But it's a very time-consuming, time-demanding career, the entertainment, and advertising business. Many careers are these days. And we eventually had a kid. We had our one child. I was 40. My wife was 36. And we had really devoted a lot of our whole 20s and 30s to building the business, building wealth, I guess you would say, making the most of that time. And we had the kid, and we didn't necessarily intend on abandoning our life. But all of a sudden, we were like, holy, once the kid showed up, we're like, wow, kids are really time consuming. We're like, holy crap, this is crazy. You literally have to have eyes on this thing 24/7. That really, honestly, kind of didn't dawn on me, the significance of that fact that you cannot really not be watching your child ever for many, many years. Either you have to be doing it or you have to pay someone to be doing it. I know that sounds obvious, but I don't know, that really shocked me. So it just all of a sudden became really hard to do what we were doing in the way we were doing it, and do the kid, and have it all be fun. And, I get really into the work, and I stress about it. And early into having our son, I was realizing that I'm just I wasn't really being fun to be around. Even though it's the weekend, I always prioritize work. So it's my head's always in that. And you can't be a great parent, and also be on the phone and thinking about work while you're trying to play, whatever you're trying to play with your kid, and I'm not the kind of person that can switch gears. I can't be on the phone working and then all of a sudden put the phone down and then be the most awesome dad, playing this, weird game that, I would never otherwise play. It's hard for me to just dive in. So it was kind of tough. And I don't know. We were just we had a nanny. I mean, in LA, if you work a lot, you get a nanny, and that's pretty much how it is. And everyone does that. And, I think that's completely fine. Don't get me wrong. But we just, I don't know, somehow we started talking about it. Maybe we could do something else where we'd have more time to be able to devote to Luca while he's young. Cause we're he's only going to be young once, So that seed somehow planted in our mind, and it just wouldn't go away. It just kept growing and growing and growing. And we're the kind of people, my wife and I was if we talk about something enough, we'll get sick of hearing ourselves talk about it. So we're we're just going to have to do this because we just can't talk about it forever. It's either we're going to stop talking about it or we're going to do it. Yeah, somehow we decided to do it. We were we're going to what I call retreat to cheaper ground. We're going to basically abandon our lives here, sell our house, and get to a place that's less expensive, lower our overhead, and see if we can't work way less and spend more time with our kid. And it was hard to do, man. It was an intense thing. And then, but while we were kind of masterminding it, and also since being into it, that's kind of where we started thinking about life in this 4-act thing. Like, obviously being filmmakers, we sort of think about those terms. And you always get sold on life as it's like this 3-act structure. It's like the schooling, then for 20 years, then you work for like 40 years, maybe 50 even. And then you retire and like you try to get some golf in or boating or whatever it is. But you're old by that point. You're like 65, 70. You're tired, your bones are creaky, hopefully you even make it, because a lot of times people, unfortunately, bad things happen and you don't make it. You don't even get to the promised land. So we were like, it's interesting. Like life should be 4X. It should be like schooling 20 years, accumulation 20 years, and then like a downshift, like for 20 years where maybe you work, but you maybe don't work as much, or maybe you change your career and, give yourself the capacity to change your career, or give yourself the capacity to spend more time with your kids, or make a change if you want to. And then hopefully you do that for 20 years. And then, okay, last 20 years, that's when you hit the rocking chair, and you just like take it real easy, basically, get your cooler of beer, sit out on your porch, and yell at kids scootering by on their skateboards. That just started to make a lot of sense to us. But we realized that, like, you're just not thinking that when you're 20, or most people. I was always thinking and preparing and trying to like accumulate like a little squirrel, like stacking my acorns or whatever. And I think it is because of my childhood and because of what I told you at the beginning about that moment of learning we had no money and realizing that when you don't have money, like a lot of things just start disappearing on you in your life. You have to stop doing stuff that you like doing because you don't have the money. And in my case, I was going to a school I really liked, a private school. I had to stop and go to a different school. And that's kind of where I made my old saying, like, if you don't deal with your money will definitely deal with you. So I was always doing that, and it paid off. Like we had amassed a lot of money. I was investing, doing the real estate. Like I just was always doing different things, like had a lot of irons in the fire. But if you don't get started on that early, there's a good chance you're not going to have those options when you're 40 or 50, and you're not going to be able to make that change. And then you're going to be kind of stuck. Maybe you'll be perfectly happy with what you're doing and it won't be a big deal. But if you're not, that's a bummer. So we wrote that article for our blog, and, it doesn't necessarily solve anyone's problem that, that might be 50 or 60 and, kind of struggling with that. But I think it is something that you really got to like talk to your kids about. You really got to like let your kids know, like, it's hard to get your head wrapped around this when you're young. You're not really worried about this stuff, but you got to like start planning early, and you don't just plan one day. You plan every day of your life, just a little bit every day. You think about it. You have a little bit of plan. You're executing along the way. It's just something you're always doing along the way.
It's important to know where you're going.
I do help people kind of like figure out, like I backwards engineer their essentially retirement plan, you might say, or long-term planning. It's like, early on, you got to say, where do I want to be when? And then you got to say, okay, well, given whatever factors I can factor in, like my work, my this and that, my potential returns on investment and so on, how much do I need to be making at what points in my life in order to achieve those goals? And what kind of investments do I need to be making along the way to supercharge my progress? And then once I know that, I have to say to myself, is my work going to produce that kind of money for me? And if it's not, what am I going to do to change my work so that it will? Because at the end of the day, you earn the majority of your money, I feel like, at work, at least certainly in the beginning. Hopefully if you're making good investments and you're getting lucky, your investments can start producing returns almost in line, or comparable to your salary and really compound. But in the beginning, it is all about working smart, picking a career that can be fruitful. It's boring stuff, I think, for kids, but kids don't get enough of it, unfortunately, at least in our country. I don't know what it's like in Europe or whatever, or other nations, but there's not a lot of personal finance education going on around these parts.
Yeah, there's not enough. Joe, I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success? And I'm curious because it sounds like yours has changed quite a bit. What does success look like in Act 3 out of 4?
Well, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that is the case. And it was surprising, but my version of success did change over time. That's something I didn't really expect. I didn't even really know that was going to happen. But, I would say there's a few versions of it. I think generally speaking, a version of success is doing something you like that produces enough money where you don't have to worry about money. I don't think you need tons of money. But you want to have enough where like money isn't, a drag on your life. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to be mega rich, because I don't think that necessarily solves all that many problems, but you don't want to be stressing about money all the time. So to me, it's, that's successful. But today in Act 3, it's like, you also want to have enough so that you can make changes to your lifestyle as you change and grow as a person. And in our case, we had a kid and we wanted to spend more time with him, because we could see that it was just going to go by really fast and we were going to end up basically, at work all the time. And we were going to potentially regret that. So having made enough correct moves so that you can change your life, if and when you want to, I think is a definition of success for sure.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing your insights and your experiences. Can you tell the Inspired Money listener where they can follow you, find out more?
Yeah. My blog is playlouder.com. And I put all this information there. I currently the way I make my part-time living, which luckily is kind of what we need these days, is I do consulting, financial consulting and business consulting for small businesses. So I put a lot of my knowledge, to work for them, but obviously they pay me for that. But I put all of my same knowledge for free on my website, so that individuals, that are looking for information and trying to figure out how to best navigate their financial life, it's there for free. And I have some mini courses that are also free on real estate investing analysis, on personal budgeting, on starting a business. I kind of say I think to be successful, you do have to be financially prudent, business minded, and investing focused. And I think if you can start a business, either whether it be full-time or part-time, you should. You can control your life a little bit more and you can get a lot of great tax benefits that you don't otherwise get as a regular W-2 employee. And those can add up to a lot of saved money. But yeah, I have a little course on that. And I even now have a little paid course on setting up your business and then all these other things that you kind of have to do to manage it in the first year. So it's a lot of free resources on my website. And social media wise, I do all the usual stuff, but probably I'm most active on LinkedIn. So if you want to LinkedIn me, feel free.
Great. Well, thanks for the resources, all from a guy who's semi-retired at age 43. Thanks so much, Joe.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? Joe shared so many money tips, from paying down debt to building a business. And perhaps best of all, rewriting his own version of semi-retirement at 43. My favorite Inspired Money moment, though, is the idea of financial piggybacking to compound wealth creation. For Joe, that meant creating content when he already had the video production and editing gear, or buying commercial space for his company instead of leasing it. It also includes owning his own home. So when Joe talks about financial piggybacking, he's really asking you to take inventory and leverage what you have to create additional revenue streams or additional businesses. Look at what you have to see if you can create another source of revenue or build equity. If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll give you a shout out here on the podcast. I'll even mail you an Inspired Money sticker or button. Don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Money Fear Challenge at inspiredmoney.fm/challenge. Inspired Money is edited by Christopher Wright of Wright Media. Thanks for joining me. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do it right now so that you don't miss next week's episode. I'll see you then. The music you're listening to right now and all other music on today's show is by the amazing Jim Kimo West. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.